Welcome to the Nurture Oklahoma live stream. This is a live interview series that I hope will help our community learn more about all the fantastic, passionate birth and wellness professionals in Central Oklahoma, maybe even beyond. Anyway, if we can get through everybody. Um, Today I have a very special guest, especially for me and my family. We have Oklahoma midwife Dawn Karlin. Dawn, would you like to briefly introduce yourself before we get started?
Sure. Hi, my name is Dawn. I've been a midwife for about 11 years here in Oklahoma, and I serve families for out of hospital birth at this time. So mostly home birth and birth center birth. Um, I
All
don't know what
right,
else you
yeah.
want
No, that's fine.
to.
How did you enter the birth world? What was your origin story?
I think that probably started a long time ago. When I was pregnant with my first child, I had a midwife for my prenatal care. So was introduced to like midwifery early on in my life. I was 20 when I had that first baby. So it was a long time ago. And then through the years, when I had my 22-year-old twins, um, the nurses were really busy and my doctor was busy and it was right before a holiday and um it wasn't it wasn't awful. It wasn't a bad birth experience. It just wasn't awesome. Like, and I just was left with a feeling of why do we treat women like this and what can we do better? So that's where I started my journey to midwifery, and it was a long journey getting there, but 11 years later, I was a midwife.
Yeah, and you do fantastic work. Like I said before, Dawn was our family's midwife for my daughter who was born in March 2020, and it was fantastic. So wonderful. So thankful for like just the calm, supportive person. We were talking about you on Tuesday's stream with Stephanie Nicole, the birth photographer, and she said that you're just like the kind of person you just want to hug, like the person that you hug and you want to hug for a longer amount of time because you just, it's just wonderful. So I thought I'd let you know. What was your first health and wellness experience? I'm sorry, your birth experience. Like once you were a birth worker, what was that first experience like for you?
Yeah, so I think probably my first experiences as somebody in the birth world as a labor and delivery nurse. So it was more on the medical side of things. But once I got into like the out of hospital birth world, just experiencing people being allowed to birth in their own environment and to just have the power to make their own choices. Like I was like, wow, this is where I'm meant to be.
Yeah, and you just felt like at home. It was more of like an at-home feeling.
Yes.
What is one of your favorite, since we're speaking about memories, what's one of your favorite memories, related to birth?
Yeah, I don't think I can just say one. There's so many. There's
Yeah.
so many people that I've helped with their first baby to their third baby to their fifth baby, and I've had some clients who are having their fifth baby that they've had with me, and that's a really special experience. But I have to pick out like what births I can say these are the most memorable. Two of my grandchildren that I have now, I was blessed to receive with my own hands. So
Oh,
those are great. Yeah.
that's so cool. That's goals right there. I've told my husband, I'm like, man, I hope that I get to be part of my kids' birth experiences later on in life. I hope I'm not like they feel like, oh, mom's gonna make us have a natural birth. But I'm not like that as a doula. But still, I think it'd be so cool to be there to witness my grandbabies. That'd be so cool. So that is such a
Yeah.
cool part of privilege of that job, getting to be able to do that. Let's see. What is this one's one of my favorites? What is a common myth that you wish you could debunk when it comes to midwifery?
Um, yeah. So when I read this question, I was like, I don't know which thing I'm gonna say. So I'm gonna say two things
Go
on
ahead.
this
Yeah.
one because they're both things that I'm like, but then I'll joke about them sometimes just because it's also funny that it's not what I do, but it is kind of like a myth that surrounds midwifery sometimes. Um, Most involving that people don't always realize how well trained midwives are. So sometimes I get one of two things. I get that people think that we are standing in a corner praying, and I might be praying sometimes, but I'm not just standing in a corner doing nothing else.
Yeah.
Um, Unless that's what the situation warrants, that everything is normal and I don't need to be doing anything else. And then, then the other one just goes along with sometimes people might think there would be a cauldron in that corner and that we practice some sort of witchcraft. And then our running joke, and my husband will say it like in front of our church friends or something, but
Yeah.
our running joke is that we are the granddaughters of the witches that were not burned,
Yeah.
and he'll say that in front of the most awkward times, but it is just like a running joke, and it has some truth, that those women were wise women, and a lot of times in the healing arts, and I feel like that's where midwifery is, so some truth there too, but also funny.
Yeah. No, like that's husbands too. Like it's such a crazy difference too, where they'd be like, oh, they're just very religious, or they're witches, and they bring their cauldron, and after they keep the placenta afterwards, like what
Yeah.
a weird thing. I love too on this stream that we can say placenta, and it's not a weird thing. Sometimes I forget when I'm out in regular company, like regular in the mainstream world. I'm like, oh yeah, a placenta or uterus, and people are like, "Did you just? What are you doing? You are not. These are not birth people." Do you have that same
Yeah.
experience as a midwife, or does it even phase you at this point?
Yeah. I think placenta isn't a word that phases me, but I do have to catch myself on saying something else or being like, "Is that too gross for dinner conversation for other people, or too weird, or too birthy?"
Too birthy. I'm like, oh, should we like not talk about pelvic floor health at the dinner table? So weird. I'll not do that next time. Okay, this is a really fun question too. Who are three influential people who have, affected who you are as a midwife? And this can be people who are local, people who are, you know, authors, or anybody.
Yeah. Um, I guess first I would have to say my preceptor who taught me about midwifery when I was going to school. That was Ann Stewart. She was amazing. She retired when I started midwifery, so she was an awesome preceptor. And then I don't know any midwives who can't say that Ina May Gaskin didn't influence them at some point. So she's pretty amazing star in the birth world. And then locally, I have so many friends that are midwives that I'm just really influenced by and impressed with the birth community that we have, and midwives who are willing to share their self and their knowledge and help each other. So I have some great friends in the midwifery world who are part of that community. So
Yes, I'm so thankful. Even just being able to do this live stream and have people and feel like I am comfortable enough to ask people in our community to come on and be a part of this off the ball project, that I was like, let's do this thing. And, people be for it and supportive has been really cool. I've appreciated being a younger doula. I've been a doula for 3 years, and I've had the community to fall back on. If I don't know something, someone knows it. And that's been really great. That whole community over competition thing is powerful. And 100% Anime Gaskin. I think that she'll probably be mentioned on every single stream. I think Stephanie
Yeah.
said anime too. Do you have a favorite anime book? Can you choose?
I think the one I recommend the most often is probably Guide to Childbirth. I really appreciate her Guide to Breastfeeding book as well. Um, I just think the Guide to Childbirth is like the most user friendly to
Mm-hmm.
recommend to clients and language that they can understand. And
And that's a perfect segue for my next question, which is what are references or resources that you highly recommend to clients or, the ones that have influenced you as a midwife?
yeah, so Ina May Gaskin's books are way up there on that list. And then I really enjoy the blog post of Mama Natural, and she has like a guide to childbirth book, and she does an online course. So I recommend those to a lot of clients. Then there's lots of natural birth courses that I just recommend that people find what seems to work the best for them. I have a lot of clients who are in more remote areas or in the western Oklahoma area where there might not be a childbirth educator in our community. So I really appreciate the online resources that are available.
Yeah, the Mama Natural one has been a favorite for a lot of my clients. That and the birth boot camp, you'll really like that. They have an online course,
Yes.
so it's really cute too. Because a lot of my clients, I'm like, oh yeah, we make a date of it. Like they sit down and they have snacks together. Them and their partner, and they'll watch it together, and it's like this whole bonding experience. I'm like, that's so cute. That's such a fantastic way to like bond and become educated about your birth options and birth in general. And it's really cute and sweet. Plus all the snackies. I'm a snacky person myself. Oh, what is the snack that you bring to every birth? Is there, if you could bring a snack to every birth, what would that snack be?
Hmm. I think I end up bringing whatever's in my car, which will be like some kind of seeds or nuts or something like that. Something that's sustainable in the whatever the weather is to be stored in my car.
Yeah. I remember one time I had my birth bag packed ready to go, and I left it in our like coat closet, and I went to put more snacks in there, and mice had eaten my snacks. It was a whole like I was like no, I had like RX bars and everything in there, and they got it. So they're very healthy. They're not here. They're not with us today anymore, unfortunately. But they were very healthy prior to that. That's a vulnerability post for everybody. I don't know. I'm sure everyone else has had experiences with mice before, but oof. um, what resources have helped you personally along the way, along your journey of being a midwife?
Hmm. I don't know if I have a real answer to that. I think the main resources that have helped helped me outside of like the things that the way that I learned in school or whatever is just my community resource, like who's here in my home to like support me and my family. So my husband is and was one of my biggest resources as I traveled on the journey to midwifery. Like, somebody's got to keep the family going when you're so busy with births and
Yeah,
um, education and things like that. So um, I try to be there for him also, but he's definitely been there for me.
yeah. Massive shout out to all of like spouses who help, birth workers because that's it's a big job. I have come back home from a 48-hour birth, and not only did my husband Brian make food, and I just like passed out, and then I woke up and he brought me food, and I fell back asleep, and he was totally supportive of that. It was fine, but he also came to the hospital to pick up pumped milk because I'm breastfeeding my baby still, and he had to come and make sure that he had milk a
Yes.
baby, and I don't know what I would do personally without my supportive husband, but I'm sure as a midwife, you have more clientele all through the month, and you have kiddos too. Like more kiddos. Um, that had to have been like a pretty fantastic support system for you. And I talk about a lot about
Yeah.
support structure, like having a support structure. I think Stephanie mentioned that on our last podcast that it's not just about like your spouse or your family life, the people that you can go to and talk like, oh, I had a tough birth experience. Maybe that's a therapist, maybe it's a fellow birth worker. I guess it probably depends on what happens, but that's been really fantastic too. So do you feel like you have a really great support structure when it comes to being a birth worker in our community? Like, do you feel like you can talk to other midwives about, you know, anything?
I do have several friend midwives who are definitely my support system as far as like needing to talk about something or get suggestions or that kind of thing. Definitely.
I love that. I don't know if our community is special in that we have so much support, but I really appreciate it. This is a question I'm really looking forward to asking you because this is one as a doula I experience pretty frequently. People, when I tell them I'm a doula, they're like, "Oh, that means you catch babies, right?" I'm like, "No, that's a midwife." No, no, no. So, for anyone who watches this or listens to this in the future, could you explain what a midwife is and the differences between an OB, a midwife, and a doula? Although I know those are pretty big differences between the three of them, but if you could like for dummies it for me, that would be fantastic. You're like, oh
Right.
no.
Wait, this question wasn't on the list.
This is a new one. I'm
Just,
throwing it at you.
you just brought it up. I'm just teasing you. Yeah, so there's lots of different kinds of midwives, but in general, midwife means with woman. And I think midwives across the board are typically providers who are taking care of women in a low risk birth setting. There are some midwives who works in the hospital setting or in the birth center setting or in the home birth setting. But they're a holistic kind of provider who is seeing how can we take care of the whole family unit to help them have the birth that they're looking for in a low risk environment. And then OBs, I mean, they're physicians. They may also take care of some low risk families who are choosing that route, but they can also higher risk clients. So you might see those are the kind of providers that midwives refer to when somebody risks out of our practice. And then doulas are the physical emotional support, not the medical side. While midwives might also provide some physical emotional support, that is specifically what doulas are trained to do.
Yes. And what kinds of things would risk somebody out of midwifery care?
Yeah, that I can give you like some examples, but not like an entirely inclusive
Oh,
list.
yeah, yeah. A couple examples would be fine.
Yeah, so people who maybe have pre-existing conditions that risk them out. So maybe somebody who has chronic hypertension or who has diabetes outside of pregnancy, or somebody who develops preeclampsia in pregnancy, or who develops gestational diabetes who that's not controlled by diet and exercise, or maybe it's something with the baby. Maybe the baby has an anatomy scan that shows that there's an anomaly that needs to be served in a hospital system. There's just a variety of things like that that might risk somebody out.
Thank you. I know that's a question I get pretty frequently, and people are like, "Oh, hey." I had someone recently ask if OBs and midwives do water birth, and for Oklahoma City, I think it's probably more of a midwifery thing, and there's not a lot of hospitals. Like, how would you answer that? How if someone's looking for a water birth in Oklahoma City, what route or what advice would you give? And it's another off the wall question, so I apologize.
Yeah. In Oklahoma City, I'm not aware of any hospital facilities who are doing water birth. So for somebody who is interested in water birth, then I would recommend that they find out, are they a low risk client who could seek care in a birth center setting or in a home birth setting. Um, Randomly enough, there is a hospital out here in western Oklahoma that has a water birth tub and a nurse midwife who does water births.
Oh, nice.
Just out here random in western Oklahoma.
Yeah, not in
Um,
the
but
city,
I
but in
know of
Western
anybody doing
Oklahoma.
that in our city. Yeah, yeah,
That's awesome. I love that for the community out there, though. Hopefully, we will have that here in the city at some point one day. That'd be great. Um,
yeah.
how does someone who might be in OBGYN care, if they're thinking about, switching to midwifery care, what does that process look like?
Right. So first they need to find a midwife, and find a midwife who has availability. I think most of the midwives that I know, we practice very similarly, and the client is looking for which midwife fits them, which midwife is their midwife, which midwife fits with their philosophies and the thing that they're looking for in a midwife, because most of us kind of practice very similarly in the kind of care that clients are receiving. So if they're wanting to switch from a physician or from a hospital system into an out of hospital system, then find a midwife who is able to accept you, because our schedules get full pretty quickly. So sometimes there might not be availability. So find a midwife, and then assuming a low risk client who is an acceptable candidate for out of hospital birth. Um, Usually, once they're transferred to the midwife, they can fill out a form to get a records release so that they can get their records from their OB, and then they'll start seeing the midwife in place of that obstetrician.
And how this is one of my favorite parts of midwifery care versus OBGYN. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a versus. I don't want to like pit them against each other or anything, because there are people who, you know, feel comfortable in one care form and the other. But how does the OB visits, how do those differ from midwifery visits?
I think it depends on the OB and the midwife, right?
Yeah.
So in general, just generally, because I'm not at every physician's office watching how they do care,
Of
nor
course.
am I at every midwife office seeing how they do care. But in general, when you go to the physician's office, you see the medical assistant or the nurse, and they check you in and do your vital signs, and the physician comes in and answers your questions and does everything that they need to do. But because they have many more clients to see, or many more patients to see than midwife has clients, their time is typically more limited. Maybe not always, but typically that visit's going to be 10 to 20, 30 minutes maybe at the most, where a midwife typically will schedule appointments from 3 minutes to an hour, a little bit longer if they know they have a client who needs more time. I know personally, I can't speak for all the midwives, but I know personally, part of that appointment time is spent getting to know the client, getting to know what their personal preferences are, and just getting a feeling for their personality, so that when I am in the birth environment, that I know how to best interact with them, and I've already heard what their wishes are, and it's because it's a really intimate situation.
Yes, 100%. I really appreciated personally, coming out of being a birth worker and being someone who has given birth, I really appreciated that, just the hour long visit with your midwife to get to know each other. Like as you said, it's a very intimate thing, and I always felt uncomfortable, like, oh, this person's gonna see me give birth, and that is such a awkward thing for me personally. Um, and I really like how you incorporated the families, and how I have seen other midwives incorporate the family. Like our daughter and our son were, measuring fundal height and helping with the Doppler, and that was really fantastic. And it helps them in the future, know what that's like. So when they want to start families one day, like they've been through the midwifery experience. Like they know there's a heartbeat, and they've measured fundal height. I thought that was really cool. When we pass Thrive Mama which is where we did our visits with Dom. The kids would be like, "Is Dawn? Is Dawn at Thrive? Can we go see Dawn? Is she there today?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry," because it feels like visiting family. It feels like going over and be like, "Hey, how are you? How's the week been?" So, um, I thought that was really cool. Um, and for birth, there is definitely a difference. So I personally have experienced hospital births and a home birth. And could you speak on how midwives are present at a birth compared to how an OB is present? And obviously, you can't speak on behalf of all OBs, midwives, but from your experiences, how those things might differ.
Right. So just speaking from like how do I take care of families? Um, Whenever the family calls me to come during a birth, then I come. And I'm there with them until they have a baby, whether that's 5 minutes or 5 hours or 25 hours or however long it is that they need me. So I think that's a difference, maybe like the constant presence of the person that you've chosen as your provider. Where that's probably not a feasible situation with an OB provider, and not the way that their environment is constructed. Um, it's just a difference, and that might be a reason why people choose a lot of the things that you've said about being able to involve the family and even just the person themselves being welcome to do as much of their own care as they're comfortable with or they're wanting to, as far as like catching their own baby or maybe a spouse catching a baby or things like that. So
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. And that your midwives tuck you in because you have a midwife and a midwife assistant. Is that pretty, common practice for midwives? Is that you have a midwife and a midwife assistant? Just checking.
Um, I think there's a couple of different ways. Like sometimes I see uh, midwives who work like me, like you're familiar with, having a midwife and a chosen midwife's assistant. And then there are a few midwives who might work alone. And then some practices will have where you have two midwives who come, maybe from the same practice if they're like a group practice, or somebody who's training as a midwife comes with them. And there's some midwives who maybe they're not in a group, but they kind of work together and they help each other. So one of the midwives will go with the other midwife when their client's having a baby and vice versa. So they'll kind of trade out that service.
Yeah, it's crazy when you have. I've been to births with clients before, and thankfully in the situation that I was at, it worked out. But the baby was born, and like 10 minutes later, one of the backup midwives that were there to assist had to leave because they had a client who went into birth. They went to labor. I'm sorry, and I was like, "Wow, you guys, your job is an adrenaline high." Like, does it ever feel like an adrenaline high for you? Or, I mean, I've seen like Megan Jennings and Taryn talking about, like, I've talked with them about the sleep deprivation and stuff, but what, what a fantastic, like, I don't know. I'm just, what do you think? What do you think? I'm just like getting excited and hyped up over midwifery, but is it an
I
adrenaline high for
definitely
you?
sometimes the oxytocin in the environment can definitely lead to a high. Um, so that's fun.
Yeah.
That's some of the fun part.
Do you ever feel I know I have spoken with performers about this and a little bit with the birth photographer that we had on Tuesday, Stephanie Nicole, about imposter syndrome. I'm not sure that at 11 years you feel that or not, but I know sometimes when I'm going into a birth at 3 years, I'm like, whew, I hope I know what I'm doing. I hope I know what they'll need. I hope that I can like instinctively pick up on their cues. And then as soon as I get in there, I'm fine. Is that something that you have experienced or maybe you still experience?
Hmm. I think I'm always learning, but I no longer have those feelings of um, am I enough? I feel like um, just part of my faith is that I know that I'm in the place where I'm supposed to be, and these families have chosen me for a reason. So I know I'm where I'm supposed to be. So I don't feel like I have that anymore, but I do remember having that in my first few years of midwifery and wondering, am I enough? Am I really what this family needs?
Yeah. Oh, that's really wonderful how you worded that about how you were chosen to be there and the family chose you, and reminding yourself like what a cool privilege it is to be able to be in that room and that intimate moment, and a little human being is being born. You get to witness that. Um, I don't think I'll ever stop getting teared up when I see these little babies. Like they'll be like half into the world, and I'll be like looking at the partner like, oh my gosh, they're half they're halfway in between worlds. And I get so teared up about it. Like, do you want to come down and see? And they're like, no, not always. Sometimes they do want to come see, but most often they're like, no. I'm inviting, that's for sure. How do you continue to learn to stay on top of things in your midwifery profession?
Hmm. I mean, I try to stay up on education, any educational opportunities that might be in our area. And if we're not really having anything, this past year we didn't have a lot of in-person things going on because of the pandemic and everything. So that was kind of missing. But there's lots of online opportunities and reading books when they come out. And coming up, I think at the end of July, we have uh, like a breech workshop coming up. So that's really interesting to me.
Oh,
And
cool.
is that kind of what you're asking? Like,
Yeah.
how do
Like,
you
just
stay
how
up?
are you? Yeah, how are you continuing to geek out about midwifery and continue your education as a midwife? A breach
Yeah.
class would be cool.
Yeah, really cool. Really cool.
That's something
I've
a
been
birth
looking forward
worker
to
would
that
say.
well. I've seen one online, but I'm looking forward to the in person and the in person like skills part, the skills lab part. That's really cool.
Yeah, that'll be super cool. And getting to like meet other people. Like, I know will there be new people, other birth workers that you'll get to like connect with while you're there at the skills workshop?
Mm. I think it's pretty intimate just because they were trying to reduce exposure to
Oh,
different
okay,
people,
makes
uh,
sense.
still kind of due to the pandemic. So we're doing a lot of our study is still online, but the skills part is in person, and it's like a 4 students to 2 or 3 instructors. So it's still kind of a small group session, but
There's still some
I
like,
like that. I kind of learn better in that situation.
okay, that's great. Then that works out. You only have a couple people there that are, and you get to be more intimate in that setting. Um, how have you fought and survived against burnout as a midwife?
Um, Sorry, I'm having to like text a client that's maybe in labor.
Oh no, that's
Um,
fine.
yeah, uh, that's hard for me. I think I go in cycles of uh, feeling the burnout, and then getting to a place where I am renewed and revived again. That I'm in the right place at the right time. For me, a lot of that happens through prayer and self care in other areas. So I've tried to be more conscientious of not feeling like I'm being selfish for taking a month off
Yeah.
or from birth. I don't always take a month off from clinic, but a month off from just like having a birth client who's due, or scheduling a massage or things like that. But a lot of my healing and burnout prevention comes from prayer.
That's fantastic. And I love that you have that structure to support you, because the burnout can be real with birth work. And taking a month off of birth, too, I'm sure that helps, because there's like a different kind of, I don't know if I would call it anxiety, but just being on call is a whole new world. It's a whole, like, whew. Like when you're on, I was on call for the first time for several months in a row, and when I was finally off call and that baby arrived, and then postpartum was over, I was like, oh my gosh, I can sleep without checking my phone like a newborn baby, because I'm
It is
always
so
afraid.
weird. I don't have to check my phone every 5 minutes. I'm like, wait,
Yeah,
what is this?
I mean, like right now, you have to like texting with a client, so like this is the life.
Sorry.
No, no, no. Like
It
that's
is.
what like I'm saying. This is just part of what the life is like. I have to always have my phone on me and my watch, and I'll like hear it. I'm like, who is that? Like in the middle of the night. Especially when I was doing the virtual birth support through the pandemic. That was a very strange. I'm not sure if you had the opportunity to do virtual because I mean midwifery. I apologize. Is in person. Um, but I had to do
Yeah, I didn't
virtual
very much
clients.
with virtual.
You didn't do any virtual? You're like, no, I'm in person. Yeah.
I
Um,
didn't do very much virtual, yeah.
it was weird because I was like laying in my own bed, texting, calling, and FaceTiming a family, and I felt like I needed to be awake the entire time, even though there'd be like a couple hours in between. And they called me like, I'm here. I couldn't sleep. I felt guilty. I felt guilty, but that's a whole nother. We don't have to do that anymore. We don't have to do that anymore. It's back to normal. We should have had a party when we were able to go back to the hospitals again. The doula should have. Let's see. There was a question that I really wanted to ask you. Oh, do you have any traditions in your work?
Hmm. I can't say that I have any traditions that I can think of. Uh,
Is
I
there
don't know
anything
what
you do
that would
before
be.
getting ready for a birth or anything like that? Just like I grab my stuff and I go.
Right. I drive as fast as I can. That's about it. No, I usually pray for every family on my way to a birth, and listen to music on the way there. But I mean, usually I'm just getting in the car to drive. Like
Yeah.
I don't think of like ritualistic things. I know some of my midwife friends are like pretty ritualistic about having like a a Coke and a Snickers after the birth or something like that. Usually, like I really need some food afterwards because it is a long time, especially if all you got in your car is some nuts.
Yeah, yeah, just like some trail mix, some omega-3 trail mix. Oh, I went to a birth with Deanna Norris in the beginning of the year. Afterwards, they're like, "Do you want to go get Mexican food?" I was like, "Yes, I want to go get Mexican food, like 100%." And I ate like two very large burritos. It was probably shameful, but I enjoyed every minute of it. What do you wish people understood better about your role as a midwife?
That's
I'm
a
sure there's
loaded
probably a lot.
question. Yeah, yeah. I think mostly I wish that people understood how well midwives are trained for their job, and and that we really want women and families or birthing people to be empowered to make their own choices. I really have a passion for health, choice freedom, and um, yeah, I think a lot of my clients know that. But does the general public? I don't think so. I wish that was something that I understood.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And for anyone, who's interested in being a midwife, who's passionate with the same things as you, what kind of advice would you offer to them if they wanted to take a similar journey, as a midwife?
Somebody who's wanting to be a midwife.
Yeah, what advice could you offer them if they were wanting to, go down a similar journey becoming a midwife?
Yeah, there's so many paths. So choosing your path and stick with it. It's not always an easy journey, and there will be times that you feel burned out, but it's worth it.
Yeah. And there's support structures to help you keep away from that burnout too. Like there's things. Um, What is one thing, speaking of that, that you wish you had known prior to becoming a midwife?
Mm.
Prior to starting your midwifery business, what is one thing that you wish you would have known that you know now?
Yeah. I mean, if it's like a question like, what would I go back in time and tell myself? What I would go back and tell myself is it's okay to make your own self and your own family a priority. It's okay to take breaks. It's okay to not give everything all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And trying to do all the things all at once. That's something we talked about
Right.
last podcast too. Do you feel like Stephanie's answer was outsourcing? Is that something that you've used as well, like outsourcing different things because you can't do it all?
Mm, I don't feel like there's a lot that I could outsource. Maybe I need help with that. Feeling like I don't have to micromanage all the things. That's it's nice in the last few years I've been kind of just downsizing. I mostly just take repeat clients with an occasional new client in there where space allows. And then in this next year, I'm going to downsize more, and I'll probably retire within the next 5 years. Um, but in that, just seeing, um, I don't know, that makes it easier not to have to try to outsource, just making it smaller instead of finding other people to do something for me.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you're a repeat client, get your babies in now. You have 5 years. I'm like, hey, Brian, just so you know, Dawn is going to possibly be retiring in 5 years. um, what do your parents say that you do for a living?
Like my mom and dad.
Yeah.
Hmm. My dad passed away a few years ago, but I think he always knew or thought that I took care of women and families. And my mom, she just thinks I deliver babies. And that's the funny conversation because then I'm like, well, I don't deliver babies. Um, you might have seen the picture from a birth that was familiar to you with me holding a pizza, pretending like I was delivering a pizza. But we don't really deliver babies, but that's what my mom will say.
But I love that you brought that up because on Tuesday we talked about how Stephanie felt that home births are like sleepovers. And I was like, that's a really good way to put that. It really does feel like a sleepover, and like when you get more intimate with the people who are on your birth team, and you get to meet that family, and there's like a special magic that happens after or while a baby's being born that just makes you feel so like close to everybody. Um, but like we legitimately made pizza and at my birth experience, and I'll have to share that photo if you're okay with it, of you delivering that pizza right before. Was that before or after Ella had been born? I think before, right?
I think it was before too because the kids were hungry.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a whole nother
Yeah,
thing. Midwives
yeah.
will feed your kid. I mean, this is not like a normal thing that happens, but my kids were hungry, and my birth photographer and my midwives made pizza for my kids and fed them. It was amazing. Um, that and I loved how the kids got to be part of the birth. Um, I didn't know this until recently. I thought that my daughter, she's my oldest daughter, I thought she had only been playing with the thermometer in the water with you because I was having a baby, and my son seemed way more engaged and helping. But the other day she was like, "Yeah, remember how Ellie came out of your butt that one time?" And I was like, "Wait, did you watch? Did you remember?" She's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I saw it." It's like, I had
Oh,
no
that's cute.
idea. And it's not my butt, sweetheart. Let's talk about this for a second.
That's a funny understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember her being really wanting to be helpful. Like she wanted to do all the things that we were doing. and which is really cute. I I like when kids want to be able, but I also understand like some people, it doesn't makes them be in their parent brain or their mom brain instead of being in their birth brain. So sometimes not every family wants to have their kids there, but when they do, it's so cute.
Yeah, no, I thought it was. I think it's really cool to see pictures of you guys supporting families that have other kids because I know how fantastic that was for our family and what a memory that's going to be for them growing up, remembering that. I know a lot of birth workers that I know are like, oh, yeah, like I became passionate about birth. My mom had a home birth with my sister. And I'm like, whoa, I can't imagine what that would have been like, as a kid to have that kind of beginning. And Lydia still says that she wants to be an assistant midwife or a midwife one day. So we'll see.
Oh,
Yeah, that'd be really sweet. Um, it's a really cool dynamic, and there are people who, like you said, they choose a certain birth experience because that's what it's all about, right? That's what they want. That's what they feel most comfortable with. And I think as birth workers, that's what's important to us. Do you feel the same?
yes. Yes. What a legacy. Even for the kids that aren't present at the birth, but to know, hey, this is where my mom had the baby, or
Mm-hmm.
my mom had a home birth, or this is where my family had their baby. That that legacy moving forward, that their first experience with birth wasn't somebody telling them how hard it is, or how difficult it is, or how scary it is, but that they had a birth at home and that was just normal.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really cool.
They didn't have like mainstream media where they're like like screaming and yelling at somebody. Oh, now the fire alarm is going off. There must be some interesting things happening in my house upstairs. My poor
Maybe someone
husband.
making pizza.
Yeah, I'm probably making pizza. Yeah, I thought that it was such a cool way to connect as a family. And now we have this whole family moment, this whole family memory all together that we can, speak on. And I hope that later on, like both my kids, son and daughter, got to be there for the birth experience. But they'll carry that on with them later when they decide to have a family or when they make the decision on whether or not they want to start a family. They're like, oh hey, I remember my mom gave birth. I know what that was like. And they don't have to. My family all had babies and they were super young, and my mom had all her babies via cesarean. And so she didn't know when I went into labor with my son, I was like, I want to have a natural birth. She was like, I've never seen that happen. So I don't know how to support you. And speaking of that, would you feel comfortable talking about um, what happens if someone plans for a home birth and things don't quite work out and they have to transfer? What does that look like? Can you give like a quick rundown of what that might look like for a family?
Yeah, so with each family at the start of their care now, I used to do it at their 36-week visit, but now I'm doing it at their first visit. We make an emergency care plan so that we talk about, okay, if you need to go to the hospital, this is our structure, this is our plan. So it kind of depends if they're laboring at home and we have a situation that's not emergency and not urgent, then the client can choose like which hospital do you want to go to, and how do you want to get there. And a lot of people will choose a private vehicle just for comfort and money and whatever other things they might choose that reason for. But if we're having an emergency or an urgent situation, we call 911 and get help from the EMS team, to get the family there. And then during during COVID, that was really hard because that was a situation where we were lucky if the birthing person got to have one support person who was their spouse or their partner, um, typically. But and now we're so glad that people can have another person, and that in a lot of places the midwife is considered, and should be considered part of the part of the team that's taking care of the client and not counted as a support person. But even if they are counted as a support person, that most hospitals are allowing two people now, so the midwife can actually go with them and provide records and provide the support that these families are used to.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know that's a question people ask sometimes about home birth. Like, well, what if something happened? Is it safe? And I mean, I'm glad that you answered because that's a pretty frequent question. I mean, I feel like I have clients that have switched to home birth from hospital birth because that they felt that was a better way to support their birth goals. And yeah, they go through the outline. And as a doula myself, we go through a whole birth preferences rather than birth plan. Because birth does whatever, you can't always plan for birth. Birth does its thing. You could plan, the most perfect giving birth in the woods next to baby deer. Like, I'm sure you've probably seen that meme where it's like, I don't care if you have a scheduled cesarean or if you're giving birth under the stars in a full moon next to baby deer, you still need support. Um, yeah, plan A through Z. That way you can still feel empowered. When people are planning for their plan A through Z, do you have any advice for them on that? Oh, I should say preferences. Look, I just said don't plan, and then I went said plan. How they can prep their preferences list. Is there any advice you have for people about that?
Yeah, I think keeping it short and simple and to the point and having flexibility in that, because you can plan all you want or have an idea of what is your perfect birth, but also know that things can happen and sometimes babies need something else than what was on your preference list. So um, flexibility is key in that.
Yeah. And when it comes to postpartum, one thing I like to recommend, maybe not stress to clients, is to plan for your postpartum like you did your first trimester, or plan for postpartum like you did your baby shower. What are your advice tips? That you would give to somebody who is planning for their postpartum.
Yeah, I agree with that. Planning for it and being prepared, maybe is like the word that I use with people. Whether that's they need to prepare breastfeeding, is that a plan that they have to breastfeed their baby? Some babies latch immediately and breastfeed from the start, like awesome, but some babies don't, and it can be a hard journey. So, taking a class or reading a book or doing some preparation for breastfeeding during pregnancy is good. And then for self care during the postpartum time, plan for that 2 weeks of resting and only taking care of your baby. And well, what can you do beforehand? Can you make meals? Are you able to afford to hire a postpartum doula, or make sure that you have a family member or a friend who can come to stay with you for a while, or come to check on you and see if you're being fed, or when somebody stops by to see the baby, maybe they fold your laundry for you while they're there.
Yes.
uh, just things that can be helpful.
Yeah, I echo all of that. That's just prepare and prep because you have baby, and then everyone preps for baby. Like, oh, we have diapers and we have clothes and we have, if you're bodily feeding, you have bottles and breast pumps. But then it's like, Mama, what are you eating? Or where's your water bottles? Do you have to cook? Like, what's that look like for you? Do you have anyone who could stop by and support? And speaking of postpartum, what does postpartum care look like in a midwifery model?
Yeah, for me, for my clients, well, first, after somebody has their baby, we're there for 3 to 4 or 5 hours sometimes, just making sure that they're doing well and their baby's doing well and that everybody is stable and settled and been assessed and weighed and all the things that, and the space is cleaned up before we leave. And then I usually return on the first or second day postpartum, and that's when we do like newborn screenings if they choose to have newborn screenings. birth certificate information, just all of those routine things, as well as checking vital signs and weighing baby again and making sure that mom and baby are both still stable. And then for my team, my assistant midwife comes and sees them again in that first week. So usually on day 5 to 7, the assistant midwife will come and then they have another home visit, another baby weight just to check in on that. And then I see clients at 2 weeks and 6 weeks routinely, and some other visits in between 4 weeks and 8 weeks sometimes, depending on what a family needs.
And do you offer breastfeeding support too? What does that look like as a midwife?
Right. Um, Most midwives have some knowledge of helping with breastfeeding, and then all of my assistants also are good with helping with breastfeeding. And then we have some great IBCLCs in the community who can also help. So just figuring out where they need the help and what that looks like is kind of individual for the mom and baby pair.
Yeah, I made the mistake of thinking that since I had breastfed two babies and I did so successfully without any issues, that my third would be just fine and I wouldn't need any support. And my assistant was Taryn Goodwin, and she came to visit me, and I'm like, it hurts so much when she latches. I'm a birth worker. I should be able to do this. And I felt like this weird shame around it. Like, I should be able to breastfeed my baby. Like, I'm working towards being IBCLC. I should be able to do this. She's like, hey, everyone needs support. Like, just because this, like, you are experiencing this journey, don't be a birth worker. You're a mom right now. You're a mom. And I was really glad for that. And all I was doing was leaning forward. That's all I was doing. I was just leaning forward when I should have brought baby back up. And I'm thankful that I had Jessica Cheatwood as IBCLC support too, because I had to heal up after after that, because my baby had a little bit of a tongue tie, and that was a little rough. But we made it, we did it, and I'm thankful that we had the support. And for anyone who's planning on breastfeeding, get your like Dawn said, get your education before baby arrives, because I've had some people who are like, oh, we'll do the class afterwards. Baby eats after they're born until said class, and doing that class before baby has to eat and make things sore or uncomfortable, or before you're in an IBCLC or CLC's care, it just saves you a lot of hurt eventually. And I get engorged too, personally. Like, let's just talk all the things. I get engorged, so it was really nice to have someone support I could text and be like, hey, what do I do? So, are you good? Do you have to go to a birth or anything?
I think I'm gonna have to leave. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's
That's
been
okay.
so.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Thank you
just
so much.
I just got the text that it's time to come. Usually
Yay!
she I'm watching her text today, so I guess I better change and head out.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I'll let you go. Thank you so much, Dawn. Everyone, I will make sure to put how you can connect to Dawn. We will let Dawn go so that she can hop off to a birth. So, have a fantastic birth.
Thanks.
See you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.